Jammed into the box-like space were men, women, and families determined to get a ticket on the 7:30 a.m. British Overseas Airway Corporation, BOAC, plane to Whitchurch, England, a seat on the lifeboat that would be their escape from a Europe that was a rapidly sinking ship. Over the past 3 cataclysmic years, Nazi Germany had tightened its sharp coils around much of the continent, but a resolute Portugal had nevertheless managed to carry on as a neutral state. And as tens of thousands of refugees, Jews, artists, communists, and other free-thinking enemies of the Reich, gathered up whatever they could and hurried to flee from the advancing goose-stepping hordes, they poured into Portugal. It was an oasis, yet one that was both temporary and ominously precarious. The country's welcome, for one thing, was not open-armed. Refugees with the proper visas were granted a mere 30-day residency, and while this statute was enforced by the public security police more often than not with only a philosophical wink and a nod, the prospect of the country's continued neutrality created more genuine terrors. Neutrality was a dangerous national strategy. It was a contract that was not even worth the paper that had not been signed. At any moment, the winds of war might come blowing in over the Pyrenees from Phalangist Spain or Vichy France, and the refugees would be trapped at the end of the continent, backed up against the roiling Atlantic as the Gestapo sighted them in the crosshair. The twin-propellered DC-3 that made 4 commercial flights each week from Lisbon to Whitchurch Airport outside Bristol offered a way out, the opportunity to escape once and for all from the Nazis' murderous grasp. England would be a secure refuge, and from there one could scramble to find a way to a new life in America or Palestine. Dreams were fueled by such possibilities. The obstacles to obtaining a ticket on a BOAC flight out of Lisbon, however, were formidable. One hurdle, albeit one that might be jumped by a nimble scheme or a king's ransom, was the requirement of a transit visa. The other, however, was more inflexible, determined by the laws of an inexorable mathematics. There were only 13 passenger seats on a DC-3. The terminal was very much a seller's marketplace. Day after frantic day, the bidding continued fast and furious. Yet, like any field man on a mission, the spy would have found the discipline to pay only fleeting attention to the countless small and large dramas that fed the tumult storming about the terminal. He'd have concentrated on the faces, and, always conscientious, his glance would also have kept returning to the tarmac. From his observation post on the bench, the view was perfect. Directly across the terminal, a row of 3 symmetrical windows, each as wide as a doorway and nearly as tall, gave an open view of the black-topped runway. And there, with the early morning sun simmering down on it as if a spotlight, the camouflage-painted plane, its name Ibis, a tribute to the spindly ancient bird, painted in a cursive script under the cockpit window, the distinctive red, white, and blue BOAC stripes on its tail, stood, ready for boarding. The spy waited, and he watched. He had been at the airport for days, ever since the order had been passed on from Berlin, and today was just like yesterday, and that had been the same as the day before. Yet his patience was undoubtedly fortified by the tenets any veteran professional would have learned the hard way. Surveillance is a game played long, and more often than not, its diligence is without reward. The quarry never shows. Worse, this assignment, he knew, was more improbable than most, its logic more a prayer than a certainty. Simply because the distinguished personage had returned to England the previous January from Bermuda on a commercial Boeing flying boat, the first transatlantic air trip in history by a world leader, that was no guarantee he'd repeat the experience. After all, even the distinguished personage, in soul-searching retrospect, had conceded that his last-minute decision to forego the waiting battleship